Well, there's Ann Brady. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Linda.
Morning. One of our staff just went on vacation to Minneapolis and he played 127 rounds of golf in 7 days.
Really?
You
like golf.
He was thrilled.
Here.
It was like
he's got to be a lot younger than I am.
he played 18 holes. Well, he's in his late 50s. He played 18 holes every day and then a couple of days, 27 holes.
Yeah.
Oh, you're counting a round of golf as 9.
No.
Yeah.
I think a round of golf is considered 18. Isn't
18, right.
Are you saying 127 holes or 127 rounds?
No, 127 holes, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you. I was stretching on that one. Okay, cool. Well, hello, John.
Morning. Hi, Linda.
Hey, Jim.
Morning.
Morning,
Well, you
John.
ran into
Let's
a wall,
see.
John.
Yeah,
John, oh, good looking.
little skin cancer taken off.
That's what it looks like.
That's a good thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as long as they catch it, right?
Yeah. I had the same thing a couple years ago.
Yeah. Pay for the good old days, right?
Yeah, right.
Here comes Canada.
Well, I didn't think Bruce was going to be able to make it today.
Oh, it was a black screen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Jay, I can actually join for about an hour and a half.
Oh,
or so.
good. Glad you can. Well, we're going to have the
Yeah.
important part of the meeting in the first hour anyway.
Right.
So glad you can make this. That's good.
Hey, Bruce.
Hey, Ken, how you doing?
Good, buddy.
Good.
Bruce, you still in Canada?
No, I'm actually up in Wisconsin today.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. That's where you do your summers is Wisconsin, right?
No, Canada, but I'm just in Wisconsin for a couple days up at Kohler there. And
Okay.
Yeah.
A colder matter, does that mean playing golf?
I wish. No, I
That's
just came here for a
Whistling
couple.
Straits or whatever that horrible golf course is.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I guess it's a little after 9. Guess we will get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the September 12th meeting of the Captiva Community Panel. We'll start off with a roll call. I'm Jay Brown and I'm here. David Mintz.
I am here, thank you.
Morning, David.
Morning, Jay.
Tony Lappy. Hopefully Tony will be able to join us. Linda Laird, I saw you, Linda. Ken Gill.
Yep.
We've seen Ken. Sandy Stowell. Hopefully she'll be able to join.
Sandy is waiting to be let in by
Okay.
10. Yeah.
And then Margaret Maville.
Yes, I'm here. Good
Hi,
morning.
Margaret.
Morning.
Ann Brady.
Morning.
We've
Good
seen.
morning.
John Jensen. There's John with a patch on his nose. Bob Walter. I think I saw you somewhere, Bob. You're here.
Good morning. I'm here. Morning,
Hi,
everyone.
Bob. And Bruce McDonald.
Yes,
who's
I'm
been
here.
with us for about an hour. Okay, our first order of business is the minutes from the last meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes
I'll make a motion.
and a second?
I'll give a second.
Okay, any discussion of the minutes? Everybody happy with them?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, all in favor of approving? Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Okay, our first order of business for the meeting, and probably the most important one, is to review the decision that the BOCC made and last week. Have David Mintz, who's been leading the charge for the community to get an outcome we hoped we would get. To have David review what happened, what the BOCC decision means, and what some of the legal options might be if we want to try to oppose that decision. So David, take it over.
Good morning, everyone. I'll try to summarize where we are at this point. On September 5th and on September 6th, the Board of County Commissioners voted by a vote of 4-1, Kevin Ruane being the one against it, voted to change our land development code. That was on September 5th. And to change our chapter, the Captiva chapter, chapter 23 of the Lee plan, and that was on September 6th. Why this is so serious for the panel, I think you're all aware of, but it became pretty evident, and there was no consultation with the panel, as you know, regarding either the land development code amendments that apply to Captiva or the plan amendments that apply to Captiva, even though the panel had drafted those initial amendments to both the code and the plan. And that seriously undermines the role of the panel in protecting Captiva. It was also serious because the Board of County Commissioners, at least the majority of the Board of County Commissioners, ignored the community. 13,600 people signed the petition opposing plan and code amendments. The Chamber of Commerce opposed them. The Board of County Commissioners received 2,500 emails from people in addition to the 13,600 petitioners. The city of Sanibel, all 5 councilmen unanimously opposed these amendments to the code and the plan. And at the public hearings that took place, virtually everybody opposed these amendments other than people who either were working, but I'll put it either working or consulting for the timbers. And so basically the community was ignored, and that is a very serious situation that we're going to have to deal with going forward. The code changes that took place, I will try to just summarize them. Outside the gate of Captiva, outside the gate of South Seas, we were 28 feet above base flood elevation is how high we were able to go, which was really 2 full floors above base flood elevation for new construction. That was changed to 35 feet above base flood elevation outside the gate of South Seas, meaning everything south of South Seas. And that potentially would permit over time the construction of a 3rd floor. I can't tell you how long that would take or if people would do it, but it permits under the code 35 feet rather than the 28 feet. As people know, we struggled as a community to move from a straight 35 feet above grade to 28 feet above base flood elevation back in 2012. And the house has been built on Captiva at 28 feet above base flood elevation since 2012. The community had surveys, the community had debate, the community had workshops. The village was opposed to moving to 28 feet because of the small plots in the village. And they were finally convinced by the community to go to 28 feet above base flood elevation. We've just moved to 35 feet above base flood elevation without any consultation with the community.
So David, that's 35 feet beginning at the first buildable floor.
Right. correct.
To the midpoint of the roof?
Yes, that's correct. Of a gable roof, yes, to the midpoint of a gable roof, yes. Exactly. So so now it's, again, it's 35 instead of 28. And then there were basically 4 changes in the code that related to South Seas. The first one is the code now exempts South Seas from the Captiva building heights. So currently, under the PUD, or the administrative interpretation that governs South Seas, they are limited to either 35 feet above grade or 42 feet above sea level. That's the rule they're living under today. When you hear about the administrative interpretation, that's what that says. We, as a panel, have always encouraged South Seas to be covered by the Captiva Code and to amend their administrative interpretation to permit them to go 28 feet above base flood elevation like everybody else on Captiva, which would allow them to take into consideration the increasing base flood elevations, whatever FEMA required over time. And they could do that, but that's not what happened here. What happened here is by being exempted from the Captiva building heights across the board, they are now governed strictly by outlying suburban, which permits them to go between 45 feet above base flood elevation up to 75 feet above base flood elevation if they meet certain criteria. So they can ask to go 75 feet above base flood elevation if they can demonstrate that the additional height is required to preserve environmentally sensitive land, secure areas of native vegetation and wildlife habitat, or preserve historical, archaeological, or scenic resources. So basically, as a matter of right, they can go 45 feet above base flood elevation, but they can request up to 75 feet above base flood elevation if they meet the criteria that I just read. And actually, they can also get a variance from the Board of County Commissioners to go higher than that. So if you
So
imagine,
is that 45 feet, David? Is that measured the same way as our 35?
yes, above base flood, first habitable floor, that's correct.
Okay, so that's basically then a 4-story building, is that correct?
If it's 45 feet, it could be a 4-story building above base flood elevation, that's right. That's right. Or it could be 75 feet of base flood. Now,
Right, but
here's what has to be understood. According to what Timbers has told us, and I'm not saying they're gonna do this.
right,
We can talk about what the application is, and we'll get to that in a second. But just as a matter of the code, they have said that where their hotel rooms are, there's a new base flood elevation of 18.5 feet. Okay. The county has also approved in the land development code up to 4 feet of additional space below the first habitable floor. So your base flood elevation could be increased by 4 feet. So if you have 18.5 feet plus 4 feet, say you're at 22.5 feet, and 22.5 feet plus the minimum of 45 is 45 and 22 is 55, 65,
Yeah.
67, right? And a half. And if you go up to 75, you can imagine where that takes you. So that's where we are. Of course, we don't know what South Seas is going to be asking for at this point, but just so people understand it, it could be 45 to 75 feet above base flood elevation. That's the first exemption that was placed in the land development code. So they went from 35 feet above grade to 44, 42 feet above sea level, whichever was lower. Now they're up to between 45 feet and 75 feet above base flood elevation. That's a significant potential increase in height. The other exemption that was approved in the Land Development Code is to exempt South Seas from the 3 hotel units per acre. Right now, under their administrative interpretation and under the Captiva Code, all properties, all resorts are limited to 3 units per acre, and hotel units count as a unit. Hotel rooms count as a unit. With the Land Development Code is simply exempted South Seas from that hotel density limitation. And again, we don't know what they're going to ask for or what the Board of County Commissioners will approve, but under a planned development proposal, which South Seas will be permitted to make, which we'll get to in a second, the hotel density is unlimited. In other words, they can ask for whatever they think is compatible with their property and with the rest of the community. And so now they have 247 units, of which hotel rooms count as a unit. Now hotel rooms would be exempt and will no longer count as a unit for density purposes. So that's the second exemption that the code.
So when they tore down the employee housing, a plan was approved where they could build approximately 140 new units. And those were going to be condominiums. And now with hotels not being calculated as part of density, if they had 107 hotel units before, that, am I understanding this correctly, that they, in addition to the 140 in some condos, could build another 107 condos, or could ask for it, let's put it that way.
It's very uncertain at this point, but what we know now is that under Outline Suburban and under their application, if they are still being held to 3 units per acre, they would be held, unless there's some sort of major change, they would be held as for 3 units per acre for single-family homes, and I believe for condominiums. But for hotel units, they wouldn't be counted as part of those 3 units per acre.
Right.
So the hotel units, whatever they apply for in hotel units, they would be separate and apart from the 3 units per acre for density purposes. So if they have, assuming they're held to 247 units per acre, because they only have 3 units per acre and they have so many acreage and they're still at 247, the hotel units would be in addition to that.
Right.
And that would be governed also, I mean, it would be governed by open space. It would be governed if they build hotel units on land, and therefore they would have less acreage possibly for the other units. Maybe they would have to cut back. The administrative judge or the magistrate or the hearing officer may say you'd have to cut back on the number of condominiums because you're using a certain amount of acreage for hotel units. All that would have to be worked out, which we'll get to in a second. But what we know now is they have been removed from the rule that applies to Twin Waters, applies to any Jensen's on the Gulf or Jensen's on the Jensen's Marina. They have been removed from that regulation, which limits 3 hotel units per acre. And basically, under the PD, hotel rooms do not count as units for density purposes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, David.
Okay. The other thing that, the 2 other things that were changed is that under our existing Captiva Code, if South Seas did no longer complied with the administrative interpretation, which currently governs South Seas, which actually is more restrictive in heights than the current Captiva Code, as you know, which allows for the incorporation of base flood elevation. And so long as they complied with their administrative interpretations of 3 hotel units, 3 units generally per acre, If they complied, they would be exempt from the Captiva code. However, if they did not comply with the administrative interpretation and sought to change that and didn't comply with it, they would then be governed by the existing Captiva code, which would be the 28 feet above base flood elevation when it existed. And they would be governed by the 3 units per acre, which would include hotel units for the rest of Captiva. But that provision, which said if you don't live by your administrative interpretation, you would be, you would have to comply with the Captiva code, that has been removed. So that's the third thing that was removed from the land development code. And the fourth thing that was approved in the land development code was a new definition of South Seas. And the new definition includes approximately 3 acres of land owned by Timbers, which is south of Captiva Drive. So that would be the Chadwick Shopping Center, the Shirley's lot, and the lot where I guess Island Management and the Sheriff's Office was, that's owned by South Seas. So that approximately 3 acres of land is now part of the definition of South Seas. Where it gets interesting and complicated, and I don't have a complete answer to this, but once you redefine South Seas to include those additional 3 acres, then those 3 acres are exempt from the Captiva code, because the current amendment exempts South Seas, whatever that definition is, from the Captiva code. However, I don't believe those 3 acres are incorporated at this time into the administrative interpretation. So they're not governed by the administrative interpretation, and they're not governed by the Captiva code. They're probably just governed by outlying suburban, which, as you know, doesn't have any density requirements for hotel rooms and doesn't have the Captiva code height requirements. This is a tricky little issue, and I don't know how it's going to handle, but that was something that nobody really focused on. But in effect, those 3 acres were rezoned, and they were rezoned, I believe, and again, I haven't studied this, but they were clearly changed without communications to the adjacent property owners, which would be Rauschenberg Foundation and other property owners that are adjacent and contiguous with those properties. So that's just another wrinkle in this whole problem, because I think a lot of the proposed changes in the code were not really thought through and not really fully understood, which is, I believe, unfortunate. So that's what happened with the code on September 5th. Those are the changes that took place on September 5th. On September 6th, there was a hearing which amended the Captiva chapter of the Lee plan, the comprehensive plan for Lee County. And 2 changes were made to that plan, which again were made without any consultation with the panel, which again drafted those provisions in the chapter 23 of the plan. The first change was to remove the goal of having 1- and 2-story homes on Captiva, to maintain 1- and 2-story homes or buildings on Captiva. And the rationale for removing that provision was that it wasn't clear whether the 1 and 2 stories includes the base flood elevation below the first 2 stories of the house. And really, all we had to do, if that was really a concern, is just make it clear that since we amended the plan in our code in 2012, that 1 and 2 stories is really 1 and 2 stories above base flood elevation.
Right.
But they didn't seek to do that. What they sought to do is remove the whole goal of 1 and 2 story buildings for Captiva, which is what they're proposing to do, which is what they did, which is what they voted to remove that goal. And that goal had to be removed because under the new land development code, we could have possibly 3 stories if you're 35 feet above base flood. And obviously on South Seas, you could have, given the height, new heights, you could have more than 2 stories there. So they basically had to remove that from the plan because the plan has to be consistent with the code. Otherwise, you can't amend the code, and the plan has precedent over the code. So that had to be removed. The other thing that was removed is a specific reference to our existing heights, which is 28 feet above base flood elevation. That we created belts and suspenders. We put 28 feet above base flood, not only in our land development code for Captiva, but in the Captiva plan, because we didn't want to go higher than 28 feet above base flood elevation. And we wanted someone to have to amend both the code and the plan. That's what happened. They amended the code and the plan, and they removed from the plan the specific reference to the 28 feet above base flood elevation, which we incorporated in the plan. The rationale that the staff gave for removing the 28 feet above the base flood elevation was that the Captiva code, the Captiva plan did not allow for the incorporation of rising base flood elevations over time. That is obviously wrong. We were one of the first communities that allowed for base flood elevations to be incorporated into our building heights provisions. And that was the rationale for removing that. It's just wrong. It's just a mistake. I don't want to say it's a mistake. It was just wrong. And but that's the rationale for removing that provision. But
Well, David, I just, we said time and again throughout this process that everybody was in favor of, of movable, flexible base flood elevations, that everybody would support that. And I don't know, the staff just ignored it, I guess.
well, there are 2 things. There's build back provisions, which are not part of these amendments. And we have always said for people who, whatever people had before a hurricane that was damaged by a hurricane, they should be able to build back what they had, but incorporate the new regs, which could include higher base flood elevation. And we've always supported that. We supported it for Timbers, we supported it for South Seas, we supported it for everybody on Captiva, and we've been consistent with that. This 28-foot rule is not build back. This is for basically new construction.
Right.
New construction was always incorporated rising base flood elevation. You would always get 2 full floors above base flood elevation. They're removing that rule from the Captiva plan on the grounds that we didn't incorporate, we didn't allow for rising base flood elevation. And all I can say for that, about that, is that it's wrong. That's not reason to, if you want to remove it because you want higher buildings on Captiva, just say it. But don't, the reason you're removing it is because it doesn't incorporate base flood elevation, because it does. And we fought long and hard in this community to have a code that incorporated base flood elevation, and it's been in effect on Captiva since 2012. And so that's just the way it is. Okay, so I just want to say what we understood as the 4 members of the county commission who voted for these changes, both in our code and plan, what their rationale was in so doing. And, nobody laid it out. Here's our rationale, but I think it became clear over time what the priorities of the 4 members of the county commission were. First, with respect to increasing our building heights from 28 feet to 35 feet above base flood, the thing that we heard more than anything else, and we met a lot with the county commissioners about this, we met with the staff, the answer we kept getting is they wanted Captiva to be consistent with the rest of Lee County. They wanted to have one rule in Lee County in terms of residential building heights. In other parts of Lee County, not all parts, but in most parts of Lee County, it's 35 feet above base flood elevation. And they wanted Captiva to have the same rule as everybody else for ease of application by the permitting department or whatever. But the answer was we wanted Captiva to be consistent with the rest of Lee County. And that's why we're going to change it to 35 feet above base flood elevation. There was not an acceptance of the argument that our community made that a barrier island has to be treated differently than places that aren't barrier islands. And consistency was the major argument that we heard. With respect to South Seas, what we heard is that, in all fairness, what they said is they believe South Seas or Timbers should have the same rights as other developers in outlying suburban of Lee County. They actually didn't think that they should be governed by the Captiva Code, even though they're on Captiva, but they should have the same rights as other developers in outlying suburban of Lee County. I want to make it clear that Timbers still has to apply for a new PUD or PD, plan development rezoning hearing. It's called the rezoning hearing, but it's a plan development application and hearing where they're going to apply, presumably, for a new development for their property. The difference is, and the county has made this clear, the county commissioners said all along, yes, they're going to have to make a rezoning application, and we will have to rule on that. It will eventually go to a hearing officer, and I'll talk about that in a second, but eventually the Board of County Commissioners approve any new development in a plan development on South Seas. But, and this is what's important, is that if we didn't change the code, they would be applying for a redevelopment of South Seas, but they would be limited to the heights on Captiva and the 3 hotel units per acre. But right now, there are new rules that govern them when they make the application for their new plan development. And the new rules are they're not limited to 3 hotel units per acre, and then not limited to even the Captiva height rules. They're limited to the 45 feet to 75 feet above base flood elevation. So if the county commissioners say, we're not going to give you more hotel units than 3 units per acre, and we're not going to give you 45 feet or 75 feet above base flood elevation, they're basically going to have to tell them they can't have what they're now permitted to have under the code. And you can imagine how difficult that would be. So that's the new condition that we're, but I just do want to say that the county commissioners have repeatedly said that, yes, they changed the rules for South Seas. They're no longer limited by the height or the density limitations for hotels as anybody else on Captiva, but they still have to come for a new application, a new plan development, and they will have the county commissioners will have the final say on what they can and cannot do. The other thing we heard repeatedly from the county commissioners is, and I'll characterize it as one size fits all. I think there is a sense among the county commissioners, at least 4 of them, that community panels have sort of outlasted their time. And I think there's generally not a positive view towards community planning panels. And we've explained this before, there's a history of community panels that have been not very productive and been controlled by 2 people or 3 people and not worked very well with the community. That has not been the case on Captiva, as we all know. And to say that one size fits all and to ignore community panels like was done for Captiva is unfortunate, but I think that's a view that some of the commissioners have. And then finally, I think there is a sense among the county commissioners, and this is just my opinion, that Lee County, given the population that's coming to Lee County, given the growth of Lee County, that we need more development. And we need to accommodate the new populations, and we need to have greater development. And I think that's just generally the view of the commissioners. And I don't think there's a lot of room within that view to have a recognition of the needs to protect barrier islands as much as they need to be protected. So anyway, that's, I think, where we are up to this point. And I just want to say some other things before I get to next steps. The Land Development Code amendments that I just described to you, for both South Seas and for the rest of Captiva outside the gate of South Seas, cannot be effective. You can't have an effective date of those amendments until the plan amendments are approved. Because you can't have land development code amendments that are contradicted by the LEAP plan, which is why there were amendments to the LEAP plan. But so those land development code amendments are not going to become effective until the plan is actually approved and becomes effective. So it's not like tomorrow they can 35 feet above base flood elevation on a property on Captiva, because the plan amendments haven't been approved, finally been approved by the state and the county. There's a process which I'll explain in a second. And so those land development code changes are going to have an effective date after the plan amendments are going to be approved. Okay. So have I been sort of clear up to this?
I think it's been you've done a great job reviewing, everything. Of course, I've been closely involved in it. Any panel members have questions? Thus far, David?
I got a question. David, so if this goes through, and outside South Seas, so you could go for new construction, 28, it'll be now 35 feet. Is the Captiva code involved at all, or it just gets thrown out when if they go for a permit to build a new house, and they can go 35 feet, the Captiva code doesn't have any effect anymore?
Our Captiva code in the proposed amendments that were passed was X'd out. So our Captiva code of 28 feet above base flood elevation was deleted from the Captiva code, doesn't exist anymore. And now the new rule is 35 feet above base flood elevation.
Wow. Okay.
Tony?
Just to give us a point of reference, and it's been a while since I've been in South Seas. I can't remember the last time I was down there, but if we look at Land's End, what is the height of Land's End? Top.
Somebody told me it's like 48 feet. Or I never heard of any building on South Seas being above 50. I haven't measured them, but the number that was being passed around in terms of Bayside Villa, which is the tallest one, and Land's End, I think was something like 48 feet.
But that's height above grade, right?
48 feet above grade, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're talking about now is obviously much higher than that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Okay, so
I have a question. When you say the effective date is not now and things, what would be a guess for the effective date?
I'm going to go through that right now, Linda.
Okay.
David, I have a question. So do the exemptions that South Seas now has, does that open the door for other resorts in Captiva to apply for those same exemptions or pursue them?
That's been the conundrum, because as Jay has said repeatedly to me and to others, is that what the South Seas exemption does is establish a precedent. And the problem is that up till now, the largest property owner on the islands, I think, is RLR, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, you would know this, but they're one of the largest ones, RLR. And then there's, of course, there's Tony's operations, and they have up to this point believed that smaller is better on Captiva and Sanibel for that purposes. And so RLR and Twin Waters have been fairly clear in not wanting to see these changes take place. However, they have shareholders, they have investors, and if South Seas is permitted to have far more density and greater heights, at some point, and maybe it won't be Tony, and maybe it won't be Sandy, and maybe it won't be, RLR, but at some point, some developer is going to say, why should South Seas be treated differently than we're being treated on the same island? In other words, and so, yes, I think you have an equal protection issue here of people being treated in a discriminatorily different way. And maybe you can make a distinction for South Seas, why South Seas should be treated differently than Twin Waters or Jensen's. But I think you're going to have to make an argument to that effect. And I think the answer to your question is that it will increase pressure on the county to allow the same exemptions for other resorts. And I actually believe over time, it'll put pressure on Sanibel too, because if you have greater height and more density on Captiva, you're going to have people on Sanibel asking the question, and all it takes is a different set of city council people to get elected. And over time, I think development pressures, grow. And so the answer to your question is, I believe it sets a precedent, and I think we will eventually have to deal with other property owners asking for the same exemptions.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That makes sense.
Hey, Dave, one more. If 3 units per acre isn't in effect, if that goes through, do you know what the density would be?
We will always have, unless outlying suburban, the LEAP plan changes, which there's no proposal for that now, but we are 3 residential units per acre, and that will stay the same at this point. That's still the same. It's
Okay.
just on South Seas, hotel rooms don't count when you're counting density. Okay, so when South Seas, right now, they have 247 units because that gives them 3 units per acre. That's what they have, 247. The rest of the property owners on South Seas have the rest of the units. There are 912 units allocated because there are 304 acres, more or less. So you have 304 acres on South Seas times 3 units per acre. That's 912. South Timbers has 247 of those. Bayside Villas, I think, has 102 or 104. Tennis Villas has their allocation. All the beach villas has their allocation. They each have their own allocations, okay?
Okay.
But 247 units included, whether it be a hotel unit or a condo.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
The hotel units don't count. So in theory, the density could stay the same, but the number of units, hotel units, could double.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, we just don't know.
I
Okay?
have another question. You mentioned that they could take the area, those 3 acres that includes Chadwick's, that they could apply those new developmental rules for those 3 acres. Is it possible that they could acquire more land and then also exempt it from the rules that are on the land now and make them part of the resort?
If they well, that is the history of the resort, ironically. The history of the resort, if you go back and look at how the resort was created, they didn't buy all that land all at the same time. The resort grew over time as they purchased different properties. And technically, the answer is yes. Technically, they can purchase another property, either, say, the post office property. Let's use that as an example. They decided to move the post office. They could technically purchase the post office property, and they could then redefine South Seas like they just did to include the post office property. And that could either be part of South Seas. And I suspect when they come into for their new plan development, it's going to include those 3 additional acres, which is not part of the administrative interpretation, I don't think. But that's included in the new definition of South Seas. And if Timbers now owns that, and it's now in the definition, they will probably make that part of their new plan development. So the answer is probably, yes, they could purchase all of Captiva and make it South Seas, technically, yeah. Yep. Any other questions before I move on? Okay, so as you know, the Captiva Civic Association has a land, I think, use committee, which consists of representatives of the various organizations and individuals that are been working together on a lot of these issues relating to these plan amendments and code amendments. And they have become basically the client with the participation of all these other individuals. And we, as you know, contributed $10,000 to the legal fund. And there are lawyers that have been retained, and in the process of new lawyers being retained, additional lawyers being retained, to deal with some of these legal issues that we're facing. And I think the best way I can talk about the legal issues without going into detailed legal strategy, which we shouldn't do and can't do, actually. One is we're not the client, and 2, you don't discuss legal strategy in front of the world. But I think the legal options are pretty self-evident, and I just want to go through them so that people understand them. What I know now is that the lawyers are reviewing the options, legal options at this point, and they will make the decisions that make economic sense and legal sense as we go through the process. But I just want to walk through what the possible legal steps are and what the most immediate ones would be based on what has to take place in terms of these code and plan amendments. Okay, as I explained to you, the code doesn't go into effect until the plan amendments are accepted. The plan amendments have been approved on September 6th by the Board of County Commissioners, by 4 of the 5 Board of County Commissioners. Those plan amendments have to be transmitted to the state before they can be finally approved by the Board of County Commissioners. So what the county has done is they have transmitted those plan amendments to the state, to the State Land Planning Agency for comments from the planning agency. And what the county does is they send it not only to the State Land Use Planning Agency, they send it to the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Education, the Department of Environmental Protection, the Florida Department of State, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, the FDOT, the Department of Transportation, to the Southwest Florida Regional Planning Council, the South Florida Management District. And all these state agencies have the opportunity to make a comment within 30 days, I believe, comment in response to the proposed transmittal of these plan amendments that the county has sent up to the state. And those state agencies comment And usually they don't have a lot to say because usually these are ministerial changes.
Dave, when we say comment, that's just, they can just make comments on it. They don't have an approval of it, do they?
No, they send comments back to the county and recommend changes, or they can recommend it be rejected for reasons that they have. They basically have input into it. And I think their comments are taken seriously, actually. If they say this is real problematic, we don't think you should do it, I don't think the county would ignore them.
Uh-huh.
But it's called a comment, it's basically a comment period. And as we know, the rationale that was sent to the state in support of our plan amendments were just wrong, particularly about the building heights. And so what happens is the comments come back to the county, and the county has to decide how to respond to those comments. They could change the plan amendments, they could alter them, they could decide not to move forward based on the comments. But when they get the comments back, they then have to hold another hearing to finalize the approval of those plan amendments. So there's actually a comment period, and then there's a final approval by the Board of County Commissioners after they receive the comments. One of the options that's being considered right now, obviously, is to submit comments from the various parties to the state regarding these particular changes. I mean, we've been commenting on this consistently about why we don't think they should have these changes. And obviously, one way to deal with this, initial way to deal with this, is to advise the state agencies that there are problems with these plan amendments, and that they don't have the support of the community, and they're not about resiliency, they're about development. They're incorrect in their rationale. I mean, we can go through the whole gamut of reasons why these are bad amendments. Okay, so those amendments, they'll get comments from the state. Our lawyers will review whether or not we should submit comments. I suspect it won't be just us that are submitting comments. I suspect other agencies and municipalities can also submit comments. And those comments will go to the state. The county will get them back. If the county approves the plan, notwithstanding the comments, or they change it, but not enough to satisfy us, you could then have an administrative challenge up to the courts, basically, to challenge those plan amendments. So you have the comment period, then you have a possibility of a challenge to those plan amendments if they're finally approved. This is something the lawyers will have to consider as we see what the comments are. If they respond to comments we may make, that will all take place, and that will be developed over time. Once that stage is done, then obviously that's done within a very short period of time, like 30 to 60 days. But once the 30-day period comes back and the county gets their comments from the state, they don't have to immediately move on this. I think they have a fairly extensive period of time to decide how to deal with it. So before they have a final hearing on it, it could take a couple of months. And then if you do an administrative challenge, that would even take place after that. Then you also have an opportunity, and this is, everybody knows this, you can challenge the land development code changes as violative of the plan, whatever that plan finally is, or as violative of other code provisions. And you would petition the courts to review that. That is a next step possibility. We don't know what would be the appropriate thing to do until we see what happens with the prior steps before that. But these are all steps related to the plan and the code, and the intent or the goal whatever steps are taken or whatever combination of steps are taken, if they're taken, it's basically to keep our code, to keep our building heights to 28 feet above base flood elevation, and to keep the density levels, meaning including hotel rooms as part of density, applicable to every property on Captiva, and keep it consistent. The idea is to do whatever we need to do to keep things the way they are. We're a barrier island. We just suffered through a hurricane. Why are we increasing density in building heights? Who does that?
Okay, so David, basically what you're saying is the BOCC decision they made last week is not necessarily final. That
That's correct. They're all,
that other state agencies will can comment on it. We can comment on it. And there's a process which we can try to appeal their decision.
it's all reviewable. Yes, they're
Yeah.
reviewable. Yes.
And so, we can, if we choose to, and we think we have, a good case, then there's another place where we can challenge, what they're doing. And the challenge could also be based upon various comments they might get from Florida, agencies.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Right. And then comes to the big kahuna, so to speak. So we do the challenges to the extent that it makes sense to do it, that it's cost effective to do it, that we think we have a decent case. We make those decisions as we see what the state and the various agencies say or do. But finally, what's going to happen is Timbers is going to make an application for a new plan development on South Seas, which will have a different heights and different densities than they now have. And at that point, obviously, and this is a very standard practice, obviously the community, these are public hearings. These are hearings that go before a hearing officer. Hearing officer takes testimony, takes input from various parties who have an interest in this, and the various parties, and it won't be just us, I'm sure, can intervene in this process and be part of this quote resume process where South Seas changes. And that's when you look at traffic, you look at infrastructure, you look at water quality, you look at whether densities and heights should actually be changed given the fact that we're a barrier island. You look at sewage, you look at evacuation routes, you look at all those issues, you look in compatibility with other parts of Captiva, and that process is a process which the community will have to play a major role to protect our island. And that will depend, our objections, our response will depend on what South Seas finally proposes. And that'll be the process that'll take place after, when and if South Seas submits an application for a plan development. They've been suggesting that won't happen for a year, but I don't know that to be a fact. That's just what we're hearing. So that's where we are at this point. Again, I think the lawyers will do what they reasonably can do to reverse the LDC and plan amendments that have taken place. There is generally deference given to county commissioners who make these kinds of decisions. The burden of proof is on the objectors. The county doesn't have to prove what they did was right. The objectors have to prove what they did is wrong. There are prevailing fee issues, meaning in some kinds of actions, the losing party pays for the winning party's fees. And so you have to pick and choose which processes you use and how strong your case is before you take certain steps. It's complicated. There is a bias towards, again, towards the legislative authority of county commissioners and other elected officials. and there's a bias towards development from the Florida legislature. And so these are all issues that have to be considered. But we are a barrier island, and we have an obligation to protect this island. So, Jay, that's the process that I think the lawyers are considering. Again, it's the comment period, and then there's challenges, and then finally there's the application period that and the intervention by the community if there is a rezoning application for a new PD, plan unit development, a plan development from South Seas. And it's our, I think, responsibility and obligation to represent the community in these processes to the best we can, recognizing that that it may not be easy.
Right. David, thank you for that, incredibly thorough review. And I think, also, again, the way you rallied the community and everything is just an amazing job. I think this community owes you a real debt. I really appreciate, everything that, you've done on this. And I know you don't want to hear that, but I can't let outstanding work go unmentioned. Sorry.
I do want to say one thing. I have never seen a community, be it Captiva and Sanibel, spontaneously respond to what they felt were threats to the livelihood, to the well-being of their island. I mean, yeah, I did some work. There's no question. Yeah, I did some work, but people were coming out of the woodwork. People I never heard of, people who were not involved in things before. We're talking about thousands and thousands of people that have spontaneously united and rallied together. It was awe-inspiring. It was,
Right.
I've never seen anything like it. And I think our community deserves an immense amount of credit for their willingness and their sacrifice in coming out and defending their islands. It was truly amazing, Jay.
Right.
And
No,
I,
it was absolutely. Is there another comment?
yes, I would like to make a comment. I truly believe if the commissioners had not had to cancel their workshop, they might have had a different way of listening to everything. Because at the meeting, the arguments from the Timbers group were tax base, and I think we should research those numbers. Were those really the numbers just from the South Seas Resort? They were also very sensitive to the issue of employment. But now that the Timbers group, all their employees will have to be traveling, so it won't be that easy for them to get the staff they need with a bigger facility. And then this idea of change is good. If I'm a commissioner and I want to develop my county and I constantly run into trouble because there's all these community panels and everyone fights my rules, of course it's easiest if I say, hey, one rule for all, and then we don't have to deal with it. So I really think, oh, and then there was the property rights. Everyone has the right to their property. But what about the people that live next to the resort? What about our property rights? No, I truly believe had they had that meeting and had they been able to be informed more so than by their staff, they might have been more open to the idea of that the change of amendments is not a good idea. But I mean, that's just in hindsight. I just wanted to.
But on the other hand, Marguerite, they did give the staff an opportunity to speak prior to the vote. And that, the staff reported on, what they heard at the community meetings, and the staff chose not to change their recommendations at all from the original. So I don't know, that just, floored me how county staff could have sat through those meetings, heard all the comment they did, and then report back to the commissioners that they had no suggested revisions to their original recommendation.
Yeah, I think I was, it was a mistake for me not to mention. I mean, we had two community meetings that came out of the continuance that took place on June 20th. And the community meetings were specifically held on Captiva and Sanibel. And there was a large turnout. And the objections of the community were laid out and they were pretty comprehensive. And the whole purpose of those community meetings was to give input to the county commissioners from Captiva and Sanibel. And the workshop was scheduled for the purpose of the county commissioners hearing what the objections were, and then to have an open discussion among the commissioners about how to respond to those objections. And they would be able to talk among themselves about those objections and what to do or not to do about them. That meeting, that workshop was canceled because of the hurricane. However, it should have been rescheduled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And it wasn't rescheduled. And what was presented by the staff, and I actually liked some of the staff personally, but I can tell you their presentation of the objections from the Captiva and Sanibel communities was really pretty skimpy. And they didn't really lay out or explain the objections or the meaning of those objections and why those objections were so important. And I think I think that was really unfortunate that that workshop didn't take place. But having said that, and having met with the commissioners about these issues, I'm not sure it would have made a difference. I think the commissioners were committed to approving these. 4 of the 5 commissioners were committed to approving these amendments. They've been discussed, as one commissioner said, since January. They've had meetings with the principals involved in this, be it the county attorney's office or being some of the representatives of Timbers. And I think by the time, remember, this was just going to sail through on June 20th. We heard about it on June 6th. Remember, we heard about it for the first time on June 1st or May 31st. And this was just going to go through. And so this was already decided upon by the beginning of June. It was only because the community came out in large numbers that it was continued until September. But I do believe that, for better or for worse, the commissioners, better for somebody, worse for the community on Captiva. But I think the commissioners, at least 4 of them, were committed to supporting these amendments pretty early on. And I didn't get a sense that there was a lot of room for movement or change when we met with them.
Right.
But I think the community did the best it can, and I think we will continue to do what we think is right.
Okay. David, thanks very much for that review. To refresh the panel, we made a $10,000 contribution to the legal fund that's being raised by the Captiva Civic Association. The Captiva Civic Association is the lead organization on pursuing legal strategies to try to, change or modify, the commissioner's decision. We made that decision because we have to operate, according to sunshine rules, and you obviously can't be discussing legal strategies and so forth in a public setting. So we all decided that Civic Association should be the organization that would retain the attorney and manage the attorney fees and so forth. But at the last meeting, we did say that we were going to make a $10,000 contribution to the legal fund. And I'm just assuming that everybody on the panel, wants to go forward with a vigorous legal effort to do what we can to modify the impacts of the decisions that were made by the Board of County Commissioners last week. having said that, if somebody wants to speak up against it, I'll give you the floor for a couple of minutes. If someone thinks we should all just accept this and move on, or has some other different idea as to how we should respond, I'll give you the floor.
Okay, I'll say one thing, you know, Bob's not on this call, is he? Bob
Yes.
Walter?
Yes, he is. Bob Walter, you're here, right?
Fine.
Okay, because do you need to take a vote on that with each person, or just for the record? I don't know what you want to do. And I'm not trying to pin Bob down on the spot, but I think, you know, everybody has a voice and
Yeah,
needs to be
right.
heard. Just a thought.
Well, I guess we could take an endorsement vote. David, can you state? Can you
Do you want
state?
me to make a motion? Do you want me
Yeah,
to?
right.
Hey, can I ask a question before we vote?
Yeah, sure.
What about, I mean, it seems to me that we've been, I don't know, outsmarted, outfoxed here, by Timbers, and it also seems to me that going through these legal challenges and all that, if you sort of think about the rationale that, David gave, you know, why they've approved it, sort of in sort of to make things standard. And then you sort of think through the future possibility that, you know, this is going to open the door for other people to ask for exemptions. I mean, is it worth us considering either becoming part of Sanibel or separating from Lee County like Sanibel did? I mean, are
Yeah,
those options worth discussing?
Yeah, I think, you know, my plan was to bring that up,
Okay.
you know, not at this panel meeting, but at a future one.
Well,
To stay focused on, you know, the legal aspects at this one, but certainly a possible reaction by the community would be to consider annexation.
Yeah.
You know, with Sanibel to prevent these kind of things from happening again.
Well,
You know,
Well, and because I think it's important to do it at the same time. One, because we'd obviously need to raise money to engage representation to do an analysis of that. But secondly, it sends a pretty clear message to Timbers here that hey, there's another option here for us that is pretty devastating for them.
and I looked at incorporation. We obviously can't incorporate, but I think annexation, I don't know what it takes to annex, but I think we should be doing it in parallel if it's a possibility, because it takes time. If we can get that going as fast as we could get it going, yes, there'll be some things that come along with annexation we won't like probably, but there's a lot of things that we would like.
well, my own feel, you know, of this community is I think we would have a very difficult time getting majority of the community to want to annex to Sanibel. And it would not be an easy process. You know, you'd have a lot of meetings with Sanibel. You'd have to have, you know, you'd want to make sure that you had representation on Sanibel City Council for Captiva. Hopefully you'd want to get a set of principles that protected Captiva from, you know, some of the things that Captiva don't like about, you know, how hard it is to get anything done on Sanibel. A lot of people have concerns about over restriction of property rights that exist on Sanibel. I think that would be a long process, you know, and not something you just have a couple of meetings and say, okay, let's present that to the public.
No, I agree, but I think the option of, let's say, and by the way, I'm not saying I'm in favor of it.
No, I know that.
I think it's worth consideration.
It absolutely is.
And I think if you said I mean, if you, we don't know what's in store for at South Seas here, but if we're in for a massive increase in the density on the island versus taking some of those shortfalls that you laid out
Right.
versus Sanibel, it might be the lesser of the two evils. Versus status quo, I'd rather stay separate. But if we're going to turn into Marco Island, it's a different
Yes.
story.
Right.
Yes, yes. So,
Mhm.
So I think it, like, instead of us looking at a bunch of opinions, I think it's worth us engaging someone to say, look, here is the options you have, and here are the, you know, what the process would be like, and here's what the pluses and minuses, because there are, you know, this is going to be a 51-49 type decision, whatever we do here. But I think we should get that in front of us, and that's going to take some money.
when we didn't incorporate or didn't join with Sanibel 20 years ago or whatever, it was a relatively close vote, I think, if I remember my history lessons. And we didn't have the South Seas threat coming down on us. So I think there's a decent possibility that the people on the island would want it. So I agree with Bruce. I think we need to move forward with due speed, find the options, engage the community, and see if this is possible for us.
Linda and Bruce, back when they looked at incorporation, they were also looking at annexation.
Yeah.
And incorporation was the path they chose.
Yep.
And obviously, it didn't take place. But when they were looking at annexation, my understanding is they were communicating with the mayor of Sanibel at the time.
Uh-huh.
There was discussion of how many seats on the council that Captiva would have. There was a discussion of Captiva having its own land development code and community plans, separate and different than Sanibel, which is the issue Jay raised in terms of permitting and those kinds of issues. And so that discussion started to take place, and then it was truncated because there was a decision to go the incorporation route rather than the annexation route. But there is some investigation. There's papers that were done. There was analyses that were done at that time, which we can get our hands on, because I know they've been passed around the last couple of days. And so I think, and there is a state process. There's a state statute, Bruce, that actually sets out.
There's a comment, David, here in the Q&A. Someone saying tonight at 5, the Lee County Charter Review Commission is discussing changing the charter so that any annexations would have to be approved by the BOCC.
I have heard that. I have heard that amendment was being proposed to the Charter Commission that arose for the first time back in June, after we objected to what the county was doing. I find it difficult to believe that this amendment to limit, to give the county final say over who can annex and who can't, I find it hard to believe that it was a result of this struggle over these plan amendments, and code amendments, but maybe it was. But it
seems like a coincidence.
It
seems too much of a coincidence.
But I don't know if it would apply to this kind of annexation, or whether it applies just to a single property. That's contiguous with a municipality or an incorporated area. I don't know what it means at this point.
Okay.
Worth taking a look at it. It would also have to preempt. You would think the state statute would preempt this, unless there's a provision in the state statute that allows the county to do this. But I looked at it, and I think it may be affected by what happens tonight.
Right.
Hey.
Yeah, John?
Yeah, I think, Captiva's always been, we liked our freedom, and we always worked with Lee County. But now that what's happened, we could look at a change, but I think I'd be against annexation just because of, it seems like there'd be a lot more restrictions. I know there's a lot more to it, but I always felt Captiva liked their freedom, and it was just a different island than Sanibel. Even though we work close together, it just seems like a different feel on Captiva.
Right. No, I understand. And, I've heard that opinion, many times in my discussion with people, over the years. But again, my own opinion is that that's a route, either incorporation or annexation with Sanibel, that needs to be revisited. My problem is I don't know how to, just off the top of my head, revisit it. I don't know what steps we would take. I haven't thought about it enough.
Yeah.
Incorporation, we're not big enough.
Well, but I think, you can get waivers for that, maybe.
Maybe, well, I think Bruce's comment, I mean, this could be a separate set of people who started working this road if you wanted it.
Maybe a separate set of people.
Well, that it wouldn't have to be David in the middle of it there could be the people working the legal route and the people working, could we do an annexation or a incorporation?
Jay,
Yes. Hello, Ken.
let's consider creating a committee to explore this with Sanibel. And if there is agreement that it could be a workable situation, then we can take it to our community.
Yeah.
I think Bruce is totally right. I think we lost him. That the county's moving in a direction that Captiva doesn't like. And what John remembers is we worked hand in hand with the county. That obviously has changed. They pretty much told us that. And David's earlier comments were that it appears to him anyway that they want to move away from the panel structure. I think this is the time we have to take a step where we are going to become Marco Island at some point in the future. And we all have a lot of family and money invested in this beautiful island.
Right. And we said we've had problems with our method of government. I'm sorry, Tony, I cut you off.
No problem. I just think one thing to be considered, are we doing this? I think there's two options why we're doing this. And I don't know, and maybe the timing of an issue like this, would it be capable of stopping Timbers to doing what they want to do, one? And two, once you do this, you can't go back. So two things to think about. I'm not saying we should do it or shouldn't, but I think if one of the reasons we're trying to do this is to stop the development at Timbers beyond what is reasonable, then is this timing fast enough to head it off? You got two forces coming this way. You got Timbers going to the county, and if we're trying to get to Sanibel, which one's going to get to the finish line first? I don't know that answer, but something the committee might look into.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think they're barreling. They've all been working behind the scenes on this for quite some time.
Right.
And I think we're being outflanked by them here, and I think we ought to get this on a study done, or just outlaying what our options are, so that at least we're playing a bit of offense here.
I think Ken saying that we have a committee, I think that's a reasonable thing to get moving on it.
Okay, well, all right. We know David is thoroughly consumed by, the legal issues. I don't think it's fair to ask him to head up this effort. I know my own schedule over the next 30 days, things I've got done, I cannot devote a significant amount of time to this. So somebody else is gonna have to take, leadership of getting this started. I mean, I'll help work on it, but I don't have the time over the next 30 days to be the driving force behind this.
Yeah, me
So,
neither.
Yeah.
There are people, I think we can look back at this, at some of the documents, but I think there are people you can retain and that you could ask just to provide what the rules are, what the laws are for affiliation, what the issues are, what issues you consider if you want to go that route. And you could ask to do a short, fairly expedited study
Yep.
of
do you have any idea who some of those people might be, David, or?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do?
Go ahead, David. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Jay asked you a question, so go ahead.
Oh, I think the Gooderhams were involved in the first one, for example. I know that amount. I know that. And so they're involved with some of those issues.
No, but there are people, Jay, that actually you can retain to do this.
Okay.
I don't know if
Ken,
this
is this something you could pursue?
We could certainly develop a report telling you what the laws are and what your options are for the next meeting. Once you get past that, if you're talking about pursuing any of that, you'd want to get a lawyer involved.
Yeah. Is there someone, Ken, that we could have come and like give us a presentation at our next meeting?
Probably not for your next meeting. No, it'd be faster if you had put something together for you to discuss, so that you would know at least what your boundaries are. That I could do. Getting somebody in here in 30 days and up to speed, I'm not sure if that's going to give you the advice.
I'm saying, I think I'm saying the same thing as you. Have them do some work, but present it to us so we can ask some questions.
You guys, I would be glad if whoever would like to lead this, I'm fine with, or if you want, I can convene something with the people who are interested in Ken and come up with a plan of what we can do for the next meeting.
Well, Ken, you could provide a review of what we did in the past and what the laws are, right? And what the rules are?
Yes, the only thing that you probably would want someone with an attorney's background to look into before that for this presentation is Tony's question about what's the timing here? If things get vested in terms of property rights with timbers,
Right.
you may be not able to undo that.
Right.
So what's the foot race and what's the timing you've got to hit so you can actually be effective, as opposed to take on all this activity and then be told, yeah, sorry, timbers has already got, the state approved that
Well,
they're
but I
vested.
think the reason you're doing this is so that it doesn't spread beyond timbers.
Or maybe we can, I don't know, can you get stays of execution? I don't know. I'm not,
Stays of development, I like that.
I don't know what it's
With Florida being a strong property rights state, Linda, that's going to be a challenge. What you've got to do is figure out when are their rights vested. It may not be until they put forward a planned development proposal, so that you could say, okay, if they're not going to be able to do it for a year, you've got time to look at some of these things. Or is it when the state says yes? I don't have an answer to that. I could certainly look up past case law, but I would prefer to have an attorney who knows that weigh in on it. Because that's really a legal interpretation that I don't feel comfortable doing. In terms of describing what the process is, what your options are, and a tentative timetable, that I could do.
Well, Sanibel obviously has interest in this happening, I would guess, since they're going to get all the traffic and everything. I mean, they're impacted as much as we are. I don't know what the point of that comment was, but
I don't think their city attorney would be the person to rely on, though. Their job is to work for the city, not for us.
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I think that the first step would be for Ken and whoever Ken needs to rely on to put together an outline of how we think about this issue, what the law is, what the timetable is, who gets involved. So for example, I know for annexation, it's a vote of the registered voters on an island unless 70% of the property owners aren't registered voters or something like that. And
Yeah.
then the vote of the property owners in the same way like an MSTDU would be 50% plus one. So there are different rules that are important for us to understand. And I think Ken can put that together. And I think we can authorize Ken to call a planner or whoever the appropriate person would be, or
Right.
have more information to present a report for us. And then maybe at the second meeting, not the next one, the one after that, we could bring somebody in to speak with us and answer questions like Bruce was saying. I just want to say one other thing. I think this is all good. I think there's a lot of moving parts here, a lot of different options. Again, Timbers hasn't submitted its PD yet. I think this is the process. We want to come out at the end of the day preserving this island as best we can. And I don't think we know what the end result's going to be yet. Timbers may decide that they don't want to fight us as much as we're willing to fight, and maybe they come in with some kind of compromise proposal that's livable. And maybe we can re-amend our plan to go back to 3 units per acre and in the process of doing this, or get some sort of negotiated agreement. But I think the more we do and the more options we look at gives us more arrows in our quiver and gives us the ability to come to a solution.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said.
Yeah, I think David has said it well. Can you do those things, Ken, for us?
Yes.
And
Okay,
can we before we vote though, Jay, can we have the isn't next on the agenda the South Sea? Let's hear what the South Sea guys are saying.
No, before,
Yeah.
even before that, should we be starting, there's incorporation and annexation, and I had not heard that we could, I know WikiWatchy is 8 people, but that's probably irrelevant. Can we be a smaller community, Jay? You've heard that.
But we don't know the answer to those things. I mean, it says,
I thought it
according
was
to state law, you've got to have at least 5,000 people to be a city.
Right.
But David tells me there's ways to get waivers on that.
Yeah, there are a number of
We're opening, folks, here. We're opening an extraordinarily complex subject.
Right.
You know, and it's not a matter of, oh, should we annex? Let's form a committee and make a decision next week.
No,
It's not going to work that way.
Well, should we annex? Should we incorporate?
Right.
Let's look at it and see what we can do and all of
Yeah,
that.
what's possible?
I definitely think it should be
What are
pursued.
options?
My own feeling was we had too much on our plate right now and busy with other things, and I was going to bring it up at the next meeting, but it's been brought up at this meeting. And if Ken can make a lot of progress on this and get us a lot of facts so that we have some real facts to discuss at the next meeting, I think that's a great next step.
I just want to say before Bruce's suggestion, we were going to talk about or vote on the money, $10,000 that we'd be contributing to the legal fund.
Well, we've already made that vote, Ann. Yeah.
Okay, we did.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, we voted to contribute money.
Okay.
It's just a matter of, do we want a resolution, endorsing David, to act on our behalf, and we're supportive of the legal effort and everything, as opposed to, no, we think we ought to let this, pass and not get involved in this. I mean, I can't believe that a majority of the panel is going to think that, but I just wanted to give people the opportunity.
Okay, well, I guess my thought about that was we have limited funds.
Yeah.
And so are we, with the 3,000 other people who've signed the petition and the overwhelming support, do we feel confident that the legal funds will be paid by the community? Because obviously we don't know yet what the total amount is going to be. And $10,000, I don't think they're charging what David charges us.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I'm just curious.
The legal fund has raised sufficient funds to carry out the next steps.
Okay.
The possible next steps. There's no budget issue with that. And I think before, we were asked to commit more funds to it, we'd know a lot more than what we know today
Okay,
about
yeah,
what
that
the
makes sense.
possible legal successes might be.
Okay,
The only motion I would suggest is the panel supports the legal and other community efforts to maintain our current density and building heights on Captiva.
Yeah.
That's basically what.
Yeah, I
I
think-
second that.
Okay. Any further discussion of that?
Mhm.
All in favor? Aye.
I,
Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, Bob. All right, where
I have
are we?
another question,
Yes.
Jay. So I was looking at when people are being elected, and my understanding is the commissioners are elected on a countywide basis. That 3 are up for election in 24 re-election, including Ruane and 2 others. Are we thinking at all about what to do about that?
I have not been thinking about it yet.
Okay.
Mm.
It may be if we have commissioners who don't listen, well, whatever. We know
Well,
that.
I know what you're saying. That's another subject we can discuss. Do we want to get involved in the political aspects of this and who should be reelected and so forth? But I think we also have to keep in mind that, you know, separate and apart from the South Seas project, we have to work with the Board of County Commissioners. We need their support for things, you know, such as your stormwater project.
Exactly.
Mm.
But exactly.
So, I mean, I know we're all very angry right now, but, you know,
There's orders of priority as well. There's
Yeah.
priorities.
right.
And I can say that I think the impacts to our island and to Sanibel outweigh the stormwater project. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, and then I have one more question about the rights of the other owners within South Seas. Do they have any rights that are being abrogated? That's probably the wrong word. By whatever South Seas chooses to do?
Ken Suarez, who's on the agenda, he has a family medical issue that he's involved with at this point. And so he may not be, he said if he could get on the call, he would, but it's a serious medical issue. And so he may not be with us, but you should just know, Linda, that the Council of Associations and Homeowners on South Seas, all of them, I believe, letter to the county commissioners opposing the proposed amendments and of the code and the plan. They've made it clear that they as the majority owners of the acreage and the units don't support the changes that were being made. And there are a lot of very complicated issues with respect to redevelopment on South Seas. The road itself, Plantation Road, is not owned by Timbers. It's owned by various of the associations. There'll be evacuation issues that relate to any development on South Seas. My understanding is even where the gate is not on land that's owned by Timbers. It may be owned by another association. So you have property on South Seas owned by Timbers, which is not contiguous, where you have other property owners there. So what I've been saying all along is this is going to be a very complicated process that could take many years. And we have to be part of the process, and we have to do it in a way that's professional and truthful. And I think we've done that so far. And I think we have to continue to do this because we may not get everything we want, but we want the best outcome for our island. And I think that these people have been completely supportive of everything we've been doing. They've been part of this process. They will continue to be part of this process. They're part of the legal work that's going on. They're doing their own legal work. They're hiring their own attorneys just to understand their property rights. And so I think that like I said, this will be a moving target over time, and we just have to be up to date and up to snuff about what's going on.
Okay. And then I have one other question. I know in politics, like in congressional races and these things, that they go out and they try to get a big war chest early to try to discourage other people from running against them. I know we have been successful at fundraising. Should we try to get more money at this point to, again, show Timbers the extent to which people are willing to stop? I don't know.
Let me say this, there's been a lot of discussion about creating a political war chest or a
Yes.
PAC or a super PAC, where the islands put together and the organizations put together a fund to support those elected officials who recognize the needs of barrier islands and of Captiva in particular. And there's discussion going. There are people who want to contribute to that fund. There was someone is reaching out to an attorney to see how you establish that fund, whether it's a 501c4, et cetera. And so that is being discussed. We're a 501c3. So that we're not in a position to do that, but there can be a community-wide organization put together with a separate board. That's goal is to do exactly what you're talking about. And there is discussion of that going on right now.
Okay, but David, you're saying the panel, because we're a 501c3, we can't be doing those kind of things, or?
Yes,
That's correct.
Okay.
you can't fundraise for politics. You can fundraise for a variety of things, but it can't be political contributions.
Okay.
But I was even saying having a larger war chest for our lawyers, indicating the depth to which we would go or the extent to which we would go. Is that useful?
I think we're going to have a pretty good size.
What?
I said I think we're going to have.
I'm sorry, I had to mute somebody.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I don't think we're going to have a problem raising legal funds. I think people are waiting to contribute. We've received quite a large sum of money already for our legal fund. And I think if we make a request as we go down the process and request more funds, we will get it.
And so from Timber's perspective, what they should feel is that we will have plenty of money to do any legal work we so desire.
I think they understand that.
Okay.
There
All right.
are some questions and comments from the audience if you'd like to go
Yes.
through the highlights. One is a correction from Barbara Joy Cooley. Due to Sanibel's charter amendments, a vote of city council cannot change limitations on height, coverage, or density. That must be approved by the voters in a referendum, just so you know.
Right.
A question about when will Holland and Knight get back to the land committee on their proposed strategy going forward? David, I guess that's a question for you.
The legal team, that's the land use committee of CCA, which is the client, is going to be meeting with the lawyers, the litigation aspects of the lawyers within the next week, and we'll have a sense of that, and there'll be a further report at the next meeting of the panel.
Okay, and you already heard the comment from Barbara Joy Cooley about the Charter Review Commission and annexation. She also said that that request for the annexation overview was made by Commissioner Pendergrass, and all 5 city attorneys in the county will be there to speak against the proposed change tonight. So obviously the municipalities are not taking this well. A comment about funding. I've been a timeshare owner at South Seas for nearly 50 years. Extended family owns 9 units. It seems to me there's a huge pool of timeshare owners who will contribute to this fund. They may not all have deep resources, but there are a lot of them, and they do have a deep love of Captiva. and apparently not of timbers.
Yes.
And then
Any other comments, Ken?
one more, how will we challenge how the process took place, committees, et cetera? I think that's probably part of the legal discussion, and David probably won't have an answer for that yet. And then a question or a comment from somebody listening on Boca Grande. While we are protected on building heights and density by their 1980 Gasparilla Island Act, which supersedes Lee County, is there anything we should be looking at? Probably, if I had to give a glib answer, a lawyer, but usually a legislative act has a fair amount of teeth to it.
Yes, the Boca Grande has a legislative, a conservation district basically, which does not allow the county to change building heights in the way they did on Captiva. Whether that was done many, many years ago, and whether or not we talked to some people about that. I think the general sense we got is that the current Florida legislature wouldn't have an appetite for creating a conservation district for Captiva in the same way they did many, many years ago on Boca Grande. But that also can, if you want to take a look at that in addition to the annexation incorporation thing, options, that would be a good option to look at to see if it's even reasonably feasible, because that would be something separate from incorporation, but it might give us some protections without having to be annexed or incorporated.
Yeah, I will do that. And I looked at that a long time ago. If I remember correctly, and I may be misremembering, one of the justifications for Boca Grande was because they were split between two counties. So they have some unique challenges because part of their island is in Charlotte County and part of it's in Lee. And so I think the overlay was done partly so they could have some issues that could not be a conflict between the two counties, but I will include that. We also have one last one that just came in. Is there any value to attempt correcting the news media propagating the misinformation that South Seas requested these changes to be able to build back resilient? My opinion about dealing with the news media is that no, but that's just me.
I think during this whole process, we've been in many different ways saying that this is not about resiliency or build back, that we've always supported, and the county has now told South Seas that their intent is to allow South Seas to build back what they had, incorporating base flood elevation, even without these amendments. And so I think the build back issue was taken off the table a month ago. And to the extent that the media doesn't fully understand that, it's not because we haven't been trying to explain it.
Another one just came in. Considering that the land development code is for implementation of the comprehensive plan, shouldn't there have been more extensive public outreach to change the plan?
Say that again?
Considering that the land
Public
development code,
outreach to change the plan.
yeah, which is a question I think we raised in the past, that they didn't follow the procedure we put in place. I believe the county attorney was telling their clients that it's a county initiated change so they can do what they want, but I don't happen to agree with that. So that is a possibility.
I didn't understand the question.
Why should shouldn't there have been more public outreach before they changed the plan?
Yes, but yes, under the current plan and our current code, any property owner who seeks to amend the plan or the code has to have a single public meeting on Captiva. The county claimed that this was county initiated, not South Seas initiated or private property owner initiated. Therefore, they didn't have to have a meeting on Captiva prior to a public hearing or presenting it to the Board of County Commissioners. Having said that, there were two public meetings, one in Sanibel, one in Captiva, prior to the county commissioners voting on September 5th, and it didn't make any difference. So another meeting in lieu of the meeting that took place on Captiva that would have taken place earlier would have been better, but I'm not sure it would have made any difference.
We have a question from a reporter with Fox 4 who is on the call. Would anyone like to speak to the media today on the topic to clear up any misinformation?
I can't do it. I have to catch a plane in about 2 hours. David, do you want to take an interview with Fox 4?
Actually, I've been religiously avoiding the news media for months now. But I'm willing to certainly speak off the record to Fox 4 if they would like to do that. So Ken, if you could just get the information, I'm willing to do that.
I will ask the reporter to send it to me.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Have we finished with all the public comment, Ken?
Pretty much. Someone's still asking, aren't these changes to accommodate expansion, not resiliency? That's not a question that we can answer. So I'm not because we have an opinion, the county has its own. So I think we've covered everything.
Okay, is Ken Suarez available, or has he not been able to make the meeting?
He is not in the list, so he's not on.
Okay, well, we need to move on then to the updates. We've been at this for almost 2 hours. Let's take a 5-minute break and reconvene. Hey, Ken, you there?
Yes, I assume you mean Gooderham, not Gill.
Yes, right. I'm sorry. How many people do we have back on? Do we know?
Panel members,
Yeah.
it looks like there are 4 of you now.
Okay, I
Of
guess
the
we'll
cameras that are live, there's 5.
wait another minute to resume.
I'm
Hey,
sorry.
hey, Jay, Bob, I got to drop off. I have an 11 o'clock call.
Okay,
So,
thanks for attending, Bob.
yeah, but just real quick.
Yeah, do you want to make
updates
a comment or two?
Well, no, not about the last 2 hours, because
Yeah.
I think this will all come out as we get down the road a little bit more. But just on our progress on 2 major projects we're working on at the resort right now, which is the golf course. It's moving along nicely. It's still scheduled for mid-November, and our North Pool deck is still scheduled for mid-December to be back and operational. So those are the 2 major projects that we're working on right now, and an update with that. But sorry, I've got 11 o'clock, so I got to jump off.
Okay, thanks for attending, Bob.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
And Brady also had to leave the call for
Right.
an 11 o'clock call.
Yeah, I knew she was leaving at 11. And I'm also going to have to leave in a few minutes. I have a plane I have to catch. So what I would like to do is to cover a couple of agenda items I need to do, and then I'm going to turn the meeting over to David to conclude the remaining agenda items. The first thing I want to do is report out on Stormwater Committee. where we left this last, Sanibel has completed a consulting study as to how they're going to deal with the additional processed wastewater that would result from Donax processing our wastewater. It's my understanding that study has been completed. It still has not yet been reviewed by Sanibel Operations. So we are still waiting on that before we can make further progress on wastewater. More important, however, is the impact of the BOCC action last week on our ability to go forward with a wastewater project. First, we'll have concerns that because of the BOCC action, Sanibel may be reluctant to follow through on this project because they will view it as potentially increasing density on Captiva and creating even more issues for Sanibel. So therefore, I'm going to have some meeting with Sanibel leadership, determine whether or not they still want to pursue this project, given the BOCC vote, and if this project, still has their support. So that's going to need to be done. And then also, I need to meet with Kevin Ruane to determine whether or not, he thinks this project will still have support and that we'll be able to get, funding to pay for a lot of the costs of this project, so the entire cost doesn't fall on the public. So I will try to complete, hopefully, those next steps over the next month and be able to get the wastewater project either moving again or suspended or whatever seems appropriate, given Sanibel and community reaction to the BOCC decision and the potential issues it creates for additional density down the road. Any questions on wastewater? The other item I want to cover is formation of nominating committee for panel nominees for next year. We have only one panel appointee term expiring this year, and that is Linda Laird. And Linda is eligible for another 3-year term. I don't see any way that if we formed a nominating committee, opened this up to the public, secured applications from the public, that the panel would choose to nominate a newcomer to the panel over asking Linda to serve another term. So it's my recommendation that we forego this year forming a nominating committee to develop candidates, and then when December comes, that we would then approve Linda for a second 3-year term. So that's my recommendation. Does anybody have any comment on that?
And Linda's willing to serve another
Yes,
term?
right.
Yeah.
Yes, Linda's
Okay.
indicated that.
Yes.
I don't, Ken, do I need a vote on that, do you think?
Probably not a bad idea, just so that the panel shows its approval.
Okay. Can I make a motion, Ken, as the chair? Or
Only
somebody
if you step down from the chair to make the motion.
Okay, I'm stepping down as chair to make a motion. I move that the panel not form a nominating committee next year, and that in December, we will then vote on whether or not Linda Laird should have another 3-year term.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion of that? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your confidence, everybody.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, and with that, I'm gonna have, David, can you take over the meeting from here?
Yeah, I can. I had to step out because there are electricians at my house, but we're
Okay,
all-
well, we covered in your absence, the wastewater committee and the nominating committee update, those 2 items.
Okay, so what, just in terms of the nominating committee, Bob Walter, not Bob Walter, I'm sorry, Bruce McDonald and,
They are CPOA,
oh, okay, got it.
and it's up to CPOA to decide if they want to offer them additional terms.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, good. So where are we up to now?
Okay, so we are, I assume Kevin Ruane is not attending,
Correct.
so we would be at LCSO update, Mike Sawicki.
Okay, and
right.
you're gonna have to leave? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I have to leave, so thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
for the
Jay.
meeting. And I will see you all next month. Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, is Mike with us?
Safe trip.
Mike
Thank you.
Sawicki, I see you're here. You want to
Yes,
give,
I'm here.
okay, you have a report for the panel and the community.
Yeah, so over the holiday weekend, we kind of observed a trend that's been on our radar for a little while with the closure of the Causeway Islands Park. There's been additional pressure on Captiva for parking for the county parks and for access to the beach. And along with that, once those few spaces fill up, we're again running into people becoming very creative about where they're parking, to include a lot of the construction sites and private residences around the island. We corrected several of those. We repaired chains that were removed or taken down from some of these sites. We added a few construction trespassing signs that the sheriff's office had printed out. But I would just kind of encourage everybody to take a look at their property, and maybe if you have absentee neighbors that haven't moved back in after the storm or because they have construction going on, if you observe problems with that site with trespassing or people going in and out of there that don't belong, that you just get in contact with me or Chris or Christine, so we can evaluate it and see if we need to make contact with that homeowner and make changes to the access to those sites and properties. Like I said, I think we've probably got in and corrected problems at 4 or 5 different properties over the holiday weekend. But we want to make sure that, especially now that people have found some of those locations, that's not a problem that recurs, on a weekly basis. So again, just, stay in good communication with us and maybe review your own property access. And if you need a chain or some no trespassing sites, signs, that might be a thing you would want to add, particularly if you're not there to observe what's going on your property over the weekends.
Anything else, Mike?
Yeah, I think the only other thing we received some reports about environmental issues related to some boats that were dragged out of position during the storm. Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission and the Coast Guard, we are working with them to get those corrected and to take any applicable enforcement action. So I know we've received a couple of calls and inquiries about that. So I just wanted to let everyone know that it is being handled. The Coast Guard was out there yesterday examining it and speaking with the owner of the boats to reach some corrective action.
Okay. Any other questions for Mike?
No.
No. Okay.
Okay, the only other thing I have to add is Jeff Powell texted me and said he had to leave for another meeting, so he's going to be unavailable to make his report.
Okay. You want to report for him, Mike?
Yeah, the fire department's doing great. They're America's heroes. Everybody loves them.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Okay.
Question, is Mike still with us?
Yes, he's still with us.
Mike, a question with the county for giving tolls on Sundays. Have you experienced any additional traffic problems or generally in the increased volume?
Yeah, we've been busy on Sundays. I mean, I don't think it's been out of control, but it certainly has been busy. And again, with access to the Causeway Islands Park still being closed. All of that traffic that normally is there, stopping at the Causeway Islands and having their beach days and picnics down there is all moving on to Sanibel and Captiva. So, we're seeing some additional pressure, some additional traffic, but it's within our ability to manage and control.
Perfect. It's been a blessing to the restaurants and the small businesses.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else for Mike? If not, someone from CEPD, I don't know if Daniel's with us or some other person giving the CEPD administrative report.
Hello, everybody. It's John Riegert today. Just a couple little updates. We had our meeting yesterday and our tentative budget hearing. We passed and went with the rollback rate of 0.3511. That's going to bring our annual budget down roughly $75,000. That'll come off the taxes. Other than that, by our standard operating procedure, we need to announce a vacancy on the board. Vice Chairman John Sylvia will be moving to Tampa, and effective September 30th will be his last date. And that's all for me. Other than that, we have Carrie Schumann, who might be available to update on what's been going on with the phase 2 proposals.
Can I add a little bit here, John, before we go to Carrie?
Yes.
So with the millage rate, for the balanced budget approach, we were going to raise it a little bit because of loss of taxable income. But it was suggested that instead we use some of our reserves and keep it at the same level, especially since our community has had the hurricane and our other stressors. So that was what the rate was about. And also, if anybody is interested in being a commissioner, you need to be a voter on the island, and we're looking for people who would like to join.
Linda, for John and you, I mean, we're knocking wood, we're going to get through this hurricane season without the dunes being built back up on the beach. Do we have some level of confidence that by next hurricane season, we will have this beach renourished with the dunes and the dune plantings back in?
Okay, I'll take my guess. First, we are investigating some hotspot renewal for one property. And things have moved along, and do we think it's going to be renourished? I would say I think it's going to be renourished by next year. This is based upon us having the funding. We've gotten through hurdles on the funding, and we have been moving through, and Nicole talks about 9 months to a year. Okay?
So, yeah.
9 months is before the hurricane, not after, but Nicole's talking about those numbers. That's what we're going for.
And to clarify on it a little bit, we are still waiting for the funding source. We've been verbally denied by the Army Corps of Engineers. So we still need to wait for the official letter of denial from them before we seek funds from FEMA.
FDEP has funds for us.
FDEP,
But for John, for Carrie, for Linda, is there some way we can
expedite
upon you the importance of making sure that the dunes are replenished, that we have the dune plantings, that we have the walkovers, if possible, on the places where there are paths where water can get through? Because, everybody said after the last hurricane, Ian, that but for the dunes and the beach renourishment, we would have been much worse off than we were. And everybody congratulated CEPD and said we did a great job. We were very lucky. I think we have to do everything within our power to make sure that that is reinstated before the next hurricane season. And this should be a priority for CEPD, if nothing else.
I will tell you that we had a very good meeting with FDEP, and as soon as we get that letter from the Army Corps in hand, they're ready to get a grant agreement over to us. So The fact that we did get through that hurdle of getting a actual denial from the Army Corps, I think was really our last big hurdle. So.
Okay, but I'm hearing you, David. I'll up pressure. I'll get plans ready to go. So I'll talk to the people, to my fellow commissioners and Daniel, and see what I can do to help move it along faster.
Thank you so much.
Can the dune replant, can the dune re-nourishment happen on a different timetable?
We have to secure the funding source first before
Okay.
we can.
Or we can have, I don't know, maybe we can get more detailed planning and take that off the critical path, okay? I don't know that to be true or not, but I will speak with Nicole and David. David,
Okay.
you know about it, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Anything else from CEPD? Nope.
I-
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Carrie, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, I was just going to give a quick additional update. And that's just to indicate that we're continuing to move on with the next phase of adaptation work. What's happened so far is that we finally got our funding agreement from FDEP, basically a work plan and a funding agreement. If you recall, we were able to get $400,000 through the recent legislative appropriation process in the recent legislative session. So we finally got our paperwork from FDEP. That should be signed, I'm sure, this week. We have a scope of work and all the pieces that need to go into our request for qualifications, which essentially means we'll put that out, get our proposals from contractors who would help us complete this work. So we're in good shape to keep that process moving. And that phase is really the primary deliverable, is an adaptation plan for the Bayside.
And David, this is your last and final chance to comment on the writing for what we want out of the legal part of it. So basically, it's what some of the rest of us have written at this point, which we know we're very smart, but we're not as smart as you, okay?
All right, I'll take a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Okay, anything else from CEPD?
I don't believe so.
Okay,
None from me.
Carrie and Matt from SCCF.
I'll hand this over to Matt for his updates.
Hi, I'll just give a quick one. We've been following closely along with everything that's been going on with Captiva, and we'll continue to stay involved with that. So I won't rehash everything that's been talked about for the last 2 hours. But some of the other things we've been following are the water quality issues that we're seeing post Idalia. The beaches still have swimming concerns and advisories set all over, and we're seeing a lot of issues with the water quality. However, there's some good news surrounding post Idalia in that the lake has not seen any meaningful increases. It's sitting at 15.4 feet right now, which is more or less where it was. It's like 0.1 feet higher than it was pre-Idalia. And the Army Corps has announced that they don't anticipate any extra releases because of the storm that we've been seeing. We would expect the lake to go up a little bit. It's projected to take about a week from the storm before we start seeing those impacts, but it shouldn't be enough that it's going to spur extra damaging outputs at this time. And so those lake releases are in the optimal flow envelope for the estuary, and they have been there for 19 days.
Any other questions for Matt? Let me just say about SCCF. You may not know this, panelists, but they've been deeply involved and working very closely with us on terms of these code and plan amendments. They've been an invaluable resource. Matt and James Evans and his staff. In terms of the petition, they were instrumental in getting that petition signed by 13,600 people, along with the CCA and the other community organizations, and they've been very part of this coalition. And I just think that they should be recognized because they've been there for us. Okay.
Well, I appreciate that, David, and it's been a great coalition to be a part of, and I look forward to continuing the partnership.
Bob Walter's no longer on the call, so I don't think we need a South Seas update any more than we've already had. I have no additional updates. And then there's the next is the wastewater committee. Did Jay give a wastewater committee report?
He did.
Yeah. Yep.
So we did that. Stormwater committee, Linda, do you have anything?
You're the contact, and I keep asking you. What's
Okay.
there's any
My
news?
understanding is that the $200,000 grant that's needed to fund the finished stormwater management study that has to take place in the village of Captiva, that has been submitted to the county. I have every reason to believe that we will get funding for that study, and everything I've been told is it's going to happen. So the answer to that, Linda, it's going to happen, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Then iguanas, John Jensen.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, last meeting we voted to have Alfredo come out an additional day every week to set traps. And he hasn't been able to come out, but he's going to start next week. And he'll be out every Tuesday and Wednesday. And he'll bring traps out. When he comes out Tuesday morning, he's going to bring out between 10 and 20 traps. He wants to find where he thinks is going to be the best place to get the most iguanas, but also a place where it might not be around workers or construction sites, and less chance of somebody stealing the traps. So he'll bait the traps when he comes out in the morning, Tuesday, go around, do his usual thing, hunt for iguanas and shooting them and snaring them. Come back and check the traps maybe every couple hours. And then at the end of the day, he'll bait the traps before he leaves, come out Wednesday morning and check the traps and go about it the same routine. So we'll see how that goes. See if that increases catching the iguanas. And but he said he can start next week on that.
Okay. Any questions for John on the iguanas? Okay. Nominating committee, I assume that took place already?
Yeah.
Okay. Other committee reports, I don't think there are any other committee reports. Am I wrong about that? Okay. Financial and D&O insurance update, Ken.
Financial summaries in your packet. No major changes. At some point this fall, we'll need to talk about some fundraising, but that may need to be coordinated with all the other activities that are going on because we don't want to be stepping on each other's work. As far as the directors and officers insurance, you do have it again, or you do have it continue at the lower price. It took them a while to try to come up with any options for more than $1 million of coverage that you asked about the last time. So far, I've only gotten one for about $1,500 for an additional $1 million in liability coverage. They had a number of other carriers decline, which seems to be a new theme in the insurance business these days. So I'm going to try to see if I can get another quote out of them, and if not, do you want me to go ahead and secure the additional coverage, or come back to the panel at the next meeting with
What do we have right now?
$1 million total for
per incident?
Yes, no, I think that's total.
Total. And you're seeking to get another $1 million to make it 2?
I was trying to see what our options are, and so far the only thing that's come back is $1 million.
For an additional $1,500 a year?
Yes.
Okay. I think that we should have it, frankly. So I don't know how other members, how much is the initial $1 million?
It was $750 a year. It was a 2-year premium, so it's worked out to $750 a year for the initial coverage.
And you're saying it's an additional $1,500 per year for an additional $1 million?
Yes, and it's a different carrier. I've been trying to go back to the one who we signed the binding we bound with, and they have not been responsive yet.
Okay.
I'll try that again.
When does our coverage end? When do we have to renew by?
Oh, we're good till next August.
Oh, okay. Could you try to
Oh.
get, yeah, I would try to get us to more than $1 million coverage and then bring it back to the panel and we'll decide on whether it's worth spending the extra money.
Okay.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yep,
Okay.
sounds good.
Okay. Any other panel member comments or questions?
Yeah.
Ken, is there any other comments or questions from the audience?
I think we've covered everything.
Okay,
Oh.
people didn't notice we had over 100 people at one point on the call with us.
Oh.
Okay, if there's no other comments from the panel members or from the audience, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
I.
Aye.
All those who are not in favor say nay. Endorsement to adjourn. I thank everyone for being here. We will contact people by email as things progress. If we need a special meeting, we will call it and notice it. Otherwise, we will have a meeting in October. Okay, thank you, everybody, and have a good day. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dave.
Go review that document,
Well,
Dave.
I will.